Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Christina and I love the baby whisperer Tracy Hogg. For those of you who haven't heard of her, I personally love her book, The Baby Whisperer Solves All Your Problems. It really helped me when my daughter was 11 weeks old to get her on a routine and to get her sleep trained eventually when she was old enough, and to do lots of other things as well. So in this series of videos, what I'm doing is I'm going through each chapter of that book and I'm just going to talk about her book, and I'm going to be talking about my own experiences implementing the techniques that she teaches. So today we're going to take a look at chapter 1 of her book. As a disclaimer, I am not affiliated with the Baby Whisperer at all. I'm just a mom who loves her and who's read this book, and it really helped me, and I really want to share this with other moms who might be going through the book or who might be interested in the book or interested about learning about principles that are in the book, things like that. So today we're going to talk about her first chapter, which is how to get your baby on a predictable routine. Essentially, she's looking at what she calls her E.A.S.Y routine, and E.A.S.Y is an acronym, stands for eat, activity, sleep, and then you time. And that's exactly how you want your baby's day to look. And she also emphasizes routine over schedule, because you're not going to be pinning these activities during the day to a certain time. You're just going to be going through this cycle. Some people call it an eat, play, sleep cycle. And you're just going to go through it every day, over and over and over and over. In the first 6 weeks, the E.A.S.Y routine is the most helpful because it gives you as a parent some insight into your child's crying. There is generally just more crying in the first 6 weeks of a newborn's life, so you have a lot to interpret, and especially if you are a first-time parent, you're going to be trying to discern each of these cries and figure out what your baby needs. And it can be difficult for some parents to actually figure that out. Other parents talk about, an intuition that you just know and you don't learn it, you just figure it out as you go. And I think for most parents that's like really unhelpful to say, because our babies are all very different human beings that have varying needs throughout the day, and we can't just assume that we know exactly how to fix them all the time. We should be learning about who our child is and how they communicate. So when you do this E.A.S.Y routine, you can actually predict the things that they might be needing. So if you start your baby's day in the morning around 7 a.m. with a feed, then you can expect that if you've completed the feed and they start crying 15 to 20 minutes after that, that they're probably experiencing some sort of digestive pain or discomfort, and they're not crying because they're hungry. They might be crying because they're tired. Especially in those first 6 weeks, a baby's wake window is very short. And so their wake window might be like 45 minutes, and they might take 30 to 40 minutes to actually eat. So there's not a lot of awake time after eating before their next nap, when they do need to sleep. So you might experience them crying because now they're tired and it's time for their nap. So one thing as well, in addition to E.A.S.Y, that you have to track is your baby's wake window and their ability to stay awake for however long before their next nap. And then also, after your baby has woken up from a nap, assuming that it was a long enough nap that left them well rested, if they start crying, then you'll know that they're hungry and that it's ready for them to have another feed. It's that time again. So that's kind of the sanity that gives you in the first 6 weeks. Especially as a first-time parent, those times can be so chaotic. You might feed your baby, lay them down, feed them, lay them, cluster feed all day long, and you just need to have some sort of assurance that this is a normal cycle and that these things are going to continue happening. But also in those first 6 weeks, you're laying the groundwork for when your baby gets older. And babies do like routines. They need to be showed what to do during the day. They don't know. They just got here. They want you to lead them through the day, and that provides them with a sense of comfort and security that they can have to explore and play and do things eventually. If you are developing an unhealthy pattern of sleeping and eating habits, even when they're 6 weeks old, you have to undo those habits at some point. And the younger you undo those habits and start to implement a healthy sleep and eating habit for your child, the easier it'll be. You don't want to lay the groundwork for something like co-sleeping and then when they're 5 years old realize that they're not going to get to a bed on their own, that you have to undo literally 5 years of co-sleeping in order to get them into their own bed. And that is going to be a lot harder than 5 weeks of co-sleeping at the beginning of their life. So that's just something that helps with the E.A.S.Y schedule. It helps you kind of reframe your perspective to see the future and to see what things you're laying down as a basis for the future baby that you're going to have, the future toddler, your future child. Even with eating, if you teach your child when they're young that it's okay to just snack every 15 to 20 minutes, then they're going to have a really difficult time consuming actual meals, sitting down, not being squirmy at the dinner table, actually finishing their plate. They might even demand food throughout the day, which might end up not being healthy food, and it's just going to lay a groundwork for habits that you'll want to undo at some point in the future. Your child does not know when they're newborn what they're supposed to be doing. Like, they don't know that humans sleep 8 hours every night, that adults at least sleep 8 hours every night, and that babies should be sleeping 12 hours every single night. They don't know that. And it is a cultural thing because, you know, hundreds of years ago, people didn't do that. But we do it now, and we do it here in America at least. And so we have to teach our child, hey, this is when you sleep, this is when you eat. We can't just assume that they're gonna figure it out, because especially when our sleep and our eating habits are disrupted by newborn life, we can only assume that they're gonna see the craziness and just assume more craziness. They can't give themselves a schedule. They can't give themselves a routine. You have to do it for them. I don't want to sound strict or hard on this because it is really difficult in the first 6 weeks to feel the pressure of needing to conform to a certain pattern every single day. Even if it's not a schedule, even if it's just a routine, it's hard. And so I want to relate to you new parents out there, and I agree with you. I see that it's difficult. And I think especially in those first 6 weeks, those are the hardest weeks, that postpartum period. You need to be really easy on yourself and relax. You should be trying out the E.A.S.Y routine if you want, and you should be getting a good feel for it, but you should also be, during that time, getting a feel for how your baby is responding to it, as well as how you are responding to it. So unfortunately, I did not find the baby whisperer until my daughter was 11 weeks old. So around 6 weeks, I was not dealing with this idea of a routine, although I did have a bedtime routine and a bedtime, and I was doing a dream feed and having a wake time. And I vaguely knew from other moms that I should be doing like an eat, play, sleep cycle, but it wasn't the baby whisperer. I hadn't even heard of her. But what I found out very early on is that I love predictability, and that's why I found this eventually and started going with it. But I love schedules. I would love it if my baby was timed to the minute and I could just expect whatever, that I could lay her down and be like, great, I have 1.5 hours to do this, and then my baby will wake up and need to eat again. I thrive on that, and not everybody does, and that's not what this is even supposed to be. So I find myself going too far sometimes and taking it too far, and so I know that I might be really stressed out, that this idea of a routine might stress me out because I'm going to expect my child to follow an actual time schedule, but I shouldn't be expecting that. I think that's expecting too much of them at that age. So it's important to be relaxed with yourself, but to understand, oh, I'm pushing it too far. And if you're watching your baby and their cues, you should be able to tell if you are pushing them too far, or maybe if they need to be pushed a little more. My daughter is a textbook baby, but she's so typical, and so she actually really likes being pushed into a schedule. And so right now she's 13 months, almost 14 months, and I do have her on a schedule where we're looking at, I'm like, oh, it's 2 o'clock, you're going down for a nap, I don't care if you're tired. She's usually tired because of her textbook personality, because that's just like who she is. She is very predictable and she does thrive off of a structured schedule. But I know that about her, and I know that if she wasn't a textbook baby and if she was a more touchy baby or a grumpy baby, that kind of technique won't work as well on her. So especially in the first 6 weeks, as you're figuring that out, you might not even realize what kind of temperament your baby has at that point, and you're going to be dealing from hormones and postpartum and all that crazy stuff. Just be so easy on yourself. When you start to hit the 2-month mark, you should be able to have a pretty predictable routine, not a schedule still, but it should be pretty predictable so that when you hit 3 months, usually if you've been doing easy from birth, by the time your baby hits 3 months, assuming that they're not premature or have any other conditions, then you should have them pretty regular and pretty down by then. You may be able to get them timed to the minute. It might just be a range of like, okay, it's 10 o'clock. I know around this time they'll start getting tired, and that's when you want to start watching for their cues. So sleep cues we'll talk about more in other videos, but you're really going to be, during this time of doing easy for the first 3 months, you're going to be going off of your baby's cues for when it comes to sleep time. Also when it comes to eating as well. So you're gonna have this routine where you're leading your baby, but you also are going to be considering them and who they are and what they need. So you're not trying to deprive your baby of food if it's not time to eat yet. You're gonna watch them, and if they start putting their hands up to their mouth, or just, you know them the best, really. If they start doing some weird quirky thing during their nap where you're like, oh, I think they're hungry, trust your instinct. Don't just assume that you have it wrong because it's not the right time yet. Go all in and feed your baby if you think that they're hungry. Don't be stressed about sticking to the routine even if you are a little off. There can be problems that arise, like realizing your baby is snacking and trying to actually get them to take full feeds. But if your baby is like hungry a little earlier than usual, that's usually not a problem, and you should feed them for sure. And then while they're awake and you're waiting for them to have their sleep part of the routine, you should be watching them for signs of tiredness. They could be yawning, they could be stretching, rubbing their eyes. My daughter would pull her ears or pull her hair behind her ears. They just look uncomfortable. Then you know it's time to start the sleep routine as fast as possible. You don't want to wait any longer. There's a very small window of perfection that you want to get your baby to sleep in. And this is unfortunately another topic that I want to dive in a later video. You want to hit that sweet spot so that they can fall asleep better and faster. If you wait too long because you're trying to wait for the right time, then they're going to have a more difficult time going to sleep and staying asleep. And if you wait too early, or you're not watching their cues, and maybe they could have gone a little later, you're just going to be trying to put down a baby that's not tired yet. And so depending on the baby, that could go well. You could make it then to the sweet spot, but you might just be exhausting yourself if you're spending like 15 minutes trying to put them to sleep and they're not tired enough yet. I just want to add as well, if you have tried out the E.A.S.Y technique but it hasn't worked for you, and you're experiencing problems and you just don't really know exactly what's happening, I really love in the Baby Whisperer's introduction of her book, she kind of lays out a bunch of reasons why this might not be working for you, because it's just one of the many parenting techniques out there and doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So some of the reasons she gives, I'm literally just going to read it right out of the book. You could be following your child rather than establishing a routine. And while you want to be aware of your child's temperament and their behavior and things that are going on in their life, you do need to be leading them. If they're not doing anything, you say, we're eating right now, we're sleeping right now. And they need that confidence and that assurance that you know what you're doing that helps them to feel secure. You might also have been doing accidental parenting. That is a common phrase that Tracy uses in this book. I think the term accidental parenting can be a little offensive because when we hear it, we're like, I'm just parenting. I'm not accidentally doing something. And I think really what she means is you are parenting, but the solution that you're choosing to a problem is creating another problem. So for example, if you're rocking your child to sleep every night, that's the solution to getting them to go to sleep. but you're also creating a dependence on a prop that's going to literally make them rock to sleep every single night until you decide to not rock them to sleep and you sleep train them. And by sleep training, I do not mean crying it out. We will get to that later. If you know Tracy Hogg's philosophy, she says that a baby should never be left alone to cry for more than 5 minutes. And even 5 minutes is excessive, honestly. But accidental parenting can get into the way of the easy routine. In the heat of the moment, you might do anything to make your baby stop crying. So if it's a habit of yours to just breastfeed because that's an instant fix, then you're going to be teaching your child unhealthy eating habits. And you're going to be laying the groundwork for, oh, if something's wrong, put a breast in it, you know? And that is wrong, especially when it comes to sleep. Sleeping and eating, you don't want to be associated. They shouldn't be associated. You shouldn't have to eat in order to fall asleep. You also might not be reading your child's cues. So like I mentioned, you want to make sure that you're watching your child and you're not watching the clock. You want to be seeing visual cues for sleepiness and for hunger. And if you don't see those cues, start looking for them. Every baby has them, honestly. I would be shocked to find that a baby didn't. You also should factor in that children change constantly. So something that might be working for your baby one week might change the next. They might be going through a growth spurt. They could be getting a tooth. They're just older. Maybe they started rolling over, and whenever they sleep in their crib, they roll and they hit their head on the crib and they wake up crying. Those are things to think about. Another reason is you might just be looking for an easy fix. And something about the baby whisperer that I think is most challenging is that she does not do easy fixes. She does not do band-aids. She wants you to put in the work so that you can get out a true good result. So like I said before with rocking to sleep is like a band-aid, and you're gonna keep doing it for the remainder of your child's life until you teach them how to sleep properly. And so this is not an easy fix. Doing the baby whisperer sleep techniques are hard and it takes a lot of work, but it lasts and you don't ever have to suffer again. Of course, unless your child changes and you have to keep re-implementing and reintroducing the same sleep techniques. Another reason is that you might not be actually committed to change. If you're co-sleeping and you enjoy it, but your husband does not, and he encourages you to look into sleep training. So you find the baby whisperer, but you're not really that committed to it because you like co-sleeping, then you need to be honest about that. If co-sleeping works for you, talk to your husband about it, work something out in your marriage, but really you need to be fully committed to change. And if you don't like the baby whisperer, then don't do it. Find something that you like and do that and be committed to it, because that's what your child needs, is consistency. They don't need you to choose the right method. They just need you to be consistent. Another reason is you might be trying something that doesn't work for your family or for your personality. So like I mentioned before, I love strict schedules, but I am flexible enough to just do a routine that's not timed to a clock. And I know that there's people out there who are way more strict with schedules than I am. And if this is difficult for you because there is no clock timer, then you might need to find a different method. Additionally, if you're not staying at home, if you might be working, going back to work after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, and your baby is with a nanny or caretaker, this might not be an ideal setup for whoever is taking care of your child. So you need to factor in how they will be taking care of your child and who's taking care of your child. If they're in a daycare, this would definitely be more difficult to have a daycare worker implement. So you just need to consider your individual life. And 2 more reasons, second to last, is if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. So the baby whisperer talks about a baby who is sleeping through the night at 4 months, but isn't taking in the suggested amount of formula. I believe they were formula fed, and they don't know how to up their formula intake so that they can be at the right amount. And what the baby whisperer says is, hey, like, if your baby's full and they're sleeping through the night, you don't need them to eat more. Some babies just eat less and some babies just eat more. Obviously, if they start waking up hungry at night, then you need to fix it. But if your baby doesn't fit into this mold perfectly, you don't need to push them to fit into it. Then lastly, you might have unrealistic expectations. I remember before I had my daughter, I just thought I was going to be really bored all the time. I could not for the life of me imagine what I would be doing all day. I was like, oh, a 3-week-old, don't they just sleep all the time? And then if they cry, I'll feed them. And so a lot of parents go into having a child. Honestly, it is the most world-shaking experience to have a baby for the first time. And I think every single parent goes through that. And it's not that you have an unrealistic expectation that you're clinging on to. Like, I wasn't clinging on to this idea of being bored all day. But I was in shock. I was just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm this exhausted. I can't believe I'm this sleep deprived, that like it hurts to breastfeed this much, that it's just emotionally just roller coastery. So I had to let go of every expectation that I had before having a child. And so if you're clinging on to certain expectations before you do have a baby, you might need to let them go, and you need to focus on your baby and who they are now. You could also have had a major life change, like finding out that your baby might have Down syndrome. You definitely can't push them into a box to be what you expected them to be before they were born. Additionally, you could have just expected to go back to work after 6 weeks. And if you get to 6 weeks and you're like, I can't do it, just be realistic about your life and about what your child needs and about what you need, because you need sleep too, just as much as your baby does, and you need to eat well just as much as your baby does. So hopefully one of those reasons might strike a chord with you if you have tried out the Baby Whisperer and you haven't really felt like the results were good enough, especially if you know people who did this book and they thrived with the routine. But there's several reasons too also why things might not be working. Just consider the fact that your child is an individual, that they don't necessarily fit a mold, that they won't look exactly how babies look in books all the time. You just have to be willing to be flexible and to let go of your expectations. You just have to be willing to roll with the punches of having a child. So this is her book. In the very last chapter, she also does talk about you get the hang of it and then everything changes. And that was one of the reasons why things might not be working, is because babies change, kids change so much. So around 6 weeks is when I started implementing a bedtime routine with my daughter. It was not the Baby Whisperer's easy routine, but I did see almost immediate results. I just got good advice from a friend at church to have a bedtime and a wake time, and to do a dream feed between 10 and 11 p.m. And I literally went that night and did it, and my daughter slept 8 hours. It was the first time she ever slept 8 hours. I was in shock. And that week she probably slept 8 hours 3 or 4 more times, but she wasn't very consistent with it still. It took her some time to get consistent, but definitely probably by 10 weeks she was a consistent 7 to 8 hours. And by 11 weeks, that's when I figured out I was putting her to bed all wrong. I was relying on a bunch of sleep props, and I decided to go with the Baby Whisperer's pick up, put down method to sleep train her when she turned 4 months. So I kind of just toughed it out from the 11 weeks, 4 months old period, but I was implementing the easy routine, and my daughter was taking it very well. We had very predictable feeds, very predictable naps, and it was just like a game changer for me. I want that story to just be an encouragement to you that you don't need to do everything perfect. No matter how old your baby is right now, it's never too late to start. Even if they are pushing 3 to 4 months, if you start implementing easy now, you're going to thank yourself when they're 8 months. If you don't do it, if you don't try to lead them and teach them in these eating and sleeping habits early, you will have to undo them later. And it can be a lot of hard work at first, for sure. And it's a learning curve, really, it is. However, it's only going to get harder the longer you wait. The more time you wait, the more you will have to undo. So that is just my piece of advice and my encouragement to you. If you have the Baby Whisperer book, do it. Like 100%, 10 out of 10 recommend. If this video is interesting to you and you want to learn more, you can watch some of my other videos that will be coming out soon. Please subscribe to my channel so you'll know when a new one comes out. I will be going through every single chapter of this book. I will have more things to say about Tracy Hogg's book and about my experience that could be helpful to you. I'm really making these videos because when I went through the book, I looked online for other parents' experiences and I didn't find anything. So I hope that if you are looking for experiences of parents who did this, that the things I have to say might be helpful to you, or at least might be a comfort and encouragement that you are doing things right, or just a comfort to keep going, that it actually turns out really well and it's amazing. And if you're just hearing about all this for the first time, then hopefully it's a parenting lifestyle that you find very helpful and that you like a lot. And if not, then go find something else that suits your lifestyle better. This is not the only right way to raise a baby. It just happens to be a way that I like and that I do.